For months, I've been dying to know when an XRP ETF might become reality. I think I finally got a solid hint, and it's actually just around the corner. So, the year is quickly winding down, and still no XRP or Cardano ETFs in sight, right? We've got Bitcoin and Ethereum ones, sure, but where are the others? Well, a fresh clue just dropped that has me kind of circling a date on my calendar. When I read it, I nearly spilled my coffee. There's talk that the SEC could open the floodgates for crypto ETFs, and XRP and Cardano might be among the first in line. Now, I came across an analysis from a pretty clued-in ETF expert that basically lays out a bit of a timeline, and it could be a game changer. Now, if you're holding XRP or ADA, or even just watching from the sidelines, you're going to want to hear this. Alright, so here's a little bit of a quick backstory. All year long, we've been teased with the possibility of altcoin ETFs. Bitcoin got its ETF, Ethereum got some love, but altcoins like XRP and Cardano, nada just yet. It's been frustrating, like waiting for a package that just keeps getting delayed, and of course, you're not familiar with the term ETF. It's exchange traded fund. Basically lets you invest in an asset through the stock market. So a crypto ETF would let people, basically invest in something like XRP or ADA without having to actually buy the crypto themselves. It's a pretty big gateway for new investors. And here we are in August, clock is ticking, and I'm thinking to myself, will we ever get those XRP or ADA ETFs? Or was it all just hype? Now, honestly, for a lot of us in crypto, an ETF has been kind of the holy grail to get mainstream respect. So this waiting game has been, well, let's just say, rather frustrating. Now, my kind of eureka moment, it came pretty much out of the blue. I was sipping on my coffee yesterday morning, doing the usual kind of scroll through crypto Twitter, when I spot a post from this guy, Nate. And I nearly kind of did a double take because he's talking about XRP and Cardano ETFs in a way that suggests something big is brewing. Now, Nate isn't just any random crypto dude. He's the president of a firm called 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰 Wealth Management and kind of an ETF guru. So when someone like him starts hinting at timelines and dropping details, you bet that I pay attention. I went deeper down that thread to see what was really up. And here is what I learned from Nate. There are 3 major stock exchanges in the United States: the NYSE, NASDAQ, and CBOE. Now, they quietly kind of filed requests with the SEC for something called the Generic Listing Standards for crypto ETFs. Basically, they're asking the SEC to give them a clear, standardized rulebook for listing crypto-based ETFs. No more one-offs, no case-by-case approvals for each new crypto fund. They just want a streamlined process. Now, it sounded technical, and it kind of is, but you've got to think of it like this. If the SEC says yes to these standard rules, then exchanges can list it and say an XRP or Cardano ETF more easily without jumping through 100 different hoops each time. That's a huge deal because it basically greases the wheels for faster approvals across the board. And it gets better, right? Those exchanges didn't just stop at asking for a rulebook. No, they actually went ahead and submitted formal applications known as 19B-4 filings. And they did this on behalf of several asset managers to list specific crypto ETFs. The translation here is that Wall Street is lining up with a bunch of crypto ETFs for a bunch of different coins. And the SEC now has a mountain of these filings to consider. So how big of a mountain, you might be thinking? Well, by some kind of courts, or counts I should say, over 75 crypto ETF proposals are sitting on the SEC's desk right now. That was 25. Now that blew my mind when I first heard it. And, that list of proposed kind of ETFs isn't just Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, it includes XRP, Cardano, Solana, and who knows what else. Pretty much like everybody and their cousin in the finance world wants a piece of this action. Now, when I realized just how many different crypto ETFs were in the queue, it really hit me, right? This isn't a small experiment anymore. It's a potential flood. Now, all we need is the SEC to open the gates. And speaking of opening the gates, here's the real kicker from Nate's analysis. He believes that as soon as the SEC implements these new standard rules, the floodgates will open. In other words, once the framework is set, the SEC could approve a whole slew of crypto ETFs in one big wave. And yes, you guessed it, XRP and Cardano would likely be among the first out of the door. Even better, Nate didn't leave the timing up in the air either. He predicted that this could go down in the next 2 months or so. 2 months. So let that sink in for a second, right? If he is right, we might see official XRP and Cardano ETFs around Halloween or early November. And I'm already picturing the headlines and the chaos, right? Imagine waking up to XRP ETF approved, right? Alerts plastered everywhere, right? Now I know that I'd have friends blowing up my phone like, dude, did you see this? I'd probably get to spit out my morning coffee multiple times and do so a little maybe happy dance in my kitchen afterwards. It's that kind of level of excitement for me. Now, beyond my personal hype here, let's also talk about why this ETF stuff even matters. And it comes down to demand. Right? There's already massive demand for crypto ETFs. Now, Nate called it a monster demand, and he's not exaggerating either. Get this, right? Crypto ETFs have seen over $26 billion flow into them in just this year. Now, that is mostly just Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs so far, of course, right? Roughly $19 billion went into Bitcoin ETFs and about $7 billion into Ethereum ETFs. In other words, people are throwing boatloads of money at these things, and it's not slowing down. Just this past July, Bitcoin ETFs hauled in another $6 billion in new investments in a single month. Ethereum ETFs took in about $5.5 billion in July as well. In fact, Ethereum's ETFs saw 5 of the best trading days ever in the last few weeks. So yeah, this appetite is kind of huge. It's kind of like everybody was waiting for a green light from the regulators. And as soon as they got a glimmer of hope, they all piled in. So you might be thinking, what changed? Why did all this money suddenly decide crypto ETFs were the new kind of hot thing? Well, according to Nate, it's the regulatory tailwinds, basically. Positive vibes from governments and regulators. For instance, the United States passed something called the Genius Act, which lays down rules for stablecoins. And there's been progress in the Digital Asset Clarity Act, which is supposed to bring some clarity to crypto regulations. The names might be a bit cheesy, but the impact is real. They're giving everyone a better sense of the rules of the game. Plus, the SEC itself has been doing a few things to signal it's getting more comfortable with crypto. They approved a mechanism for Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs to do what's called in-kind creation and redemption, which basically means that these funds can swap actual crypto for shares behind the scenes. It's a little bit technical, and trust me, it is, but it's a good sign, right? When the SEC is okay with ETFs handling actual crypto, and oh, get this, the SEC even launched something called Project Crypto, with an SEC commissioner named Paul Atkins saying that he wants to bring the financial markets on chain. And yes, you did indeed hear that right. the SEC is talking about putting the stock market on the blockchain. Now, I did a double take reading that one, trust me, right? Who are you and what are you, at least have you done, I should say, with the real SEC, right? Because I'm all for it, and all of these moves have given institutional investors the kind of warm fuzzies about crypto. And it's kind of like the regulators finally said, all right, we will allow it. And the big money, people kind of just took that as their kind of cue to move on in. But picture it, right? The SEC cracks open the door just a little bit, and Wall Street investors come storming in like it's a Black Friday sale at the mall. Now, that initial rush that we saw was mostly into Bitcoin and Ether, since those were the first available products. Now, imagine that same rush, but for XRP and other altcoins once they actually get their own ETFs. Now, if the door opens fully, we could see a tidal wave of new money flooding on in. JP Morgan even estimated that an XRP ETF and a Solana ETF could pull in somewhere between $3 and $8 billion in new investments pretty quickly. That's a whole ton of money potentially pouring into these coins' ecosystems. Now, it would need to be, or at least it would be, I guess, like adding rocket fuel to an engine that's already revving up. Now, you might be wondering here, what would all this new money and these fancy ETFs mean for prices of XRP or Cardano themselves? Well, honestly, it's a little hard to say for sure, but it's definitely going to shake things up. Right? Some people are convinced that the minute that XRP or ADA ETFs get approved, the price will skyrocket because suddenly a ton of new investors will easily jump on in. Others are a little bit more cautious, suggesting that maybe a lot of expectations is already kind of baked into the current prices, or that any kind of price spike could be temporary if people buy the rumor and sell the news. Now, I'm not about to make any bold price predictions today, but you can bet that I'm going to be glued to the charts if and when those ETFs go live, just to see how the market reacts. Now, let's not forget, you and I don't actually need an ETF to invest in crypto, right? We can just open an app and buy XRP or ADA directly if we want. Heck, I use Kraken Pro to trade crypto. Here's a shameless plug for you guys as well. I have an affiliate link for Kraken in the description down below, and using it supports the channel here, but of course there's no pressure to do so, right? It costs you nothing extra, but if you do want a new exchange that I personally use, you can check out Kraken via the link in the description. The point is that we're comfortable dealing with crypto exchanges and wallets, but a lot of newer people and institutions out there aren't. Think of kind of big pension funds, or even just your neighbors who casually kind of, maybe a little bit curious about cryptocurrencies, but they don't or doesn't really want to kind of deal with all the technical hassles that come with owning crypto, right? For them, an ETF is the perfect gateway. It's familiar and regulated, like buying stocks, right? So those ETFs could bring in a whole new crowd who otherwise might never touch actual cryptocurrencies themselves or even crypto exchanges. And that is a game changer for adoption. All right, now let's talk about these expectations and of course all the odds, right? Because there's this site, Polymarket, which is basically a prediction market where people bet on whether certain events will happen. Now they have markets on these very ETF approvals. And right now, the crowd on Polymarket is betting that there's about an 85% chance that we're going to see a Cardano spot ETF approved by the end of 2025, right? 85%. To put that into perspective, just a week ago, they were only giving it about a 63% chance. So talk about a surge in confidence. And for XRP, Polymarket bettors are actually around 79% confident that a spot XRP ETF will be approved by December 31st, 2025. That's almost up slightly, also up I should say, significantly from where it was at around 66% just a week ago. So in prediction market terms, those odds are pretty damn high. I mean, if my weather app says there's a 79% chance of rain, I'm definitely going to be grabbing an umbrella. Likewise, seeing roughly 80% odds of an XRP ETF tells me that there's a lot of people that are feeling optimistic. Of course, 80% is not 100%, so there's still a 20% chance that it doesn't happen by 2025. But it's encouraging, to say the least. Now, all of this information has me feeling a little bit of a mix of excitement and cautious optimism. On one hand, I'm thinking, this is it, right? This could be the moment that XRP and ADA finally gets that Wall Street stamp of approval. I even caught myself for a split second there thinking, should I grab more XRP before the rest of the world catches on? And that's the FOMO taking over. And for sure, it's a little voice just saying, don't miss out. And I'd be lying if I said I was not tempted, right? But on the other hand, right, I've learned that not to count my chickens before they have hatched in crypto. I've seen so many almost there moments kind of fizzle out. Remember a few years back when everyone was absolutely convinced a Bitcoin ETF would be approved immediately, and then the SEC slammed on the brakes and said no, right? Now I do remember that, and it sucked, right? My heart was, or at least has been broken by ETF rumors before. So while I'm, hopeful, I'm also telling myself to stay calm and not start celebrating until the ink is dry on those approval documents. In fact, just the other day, our Discord server, right, which is completely free educational community if you want to join the discussion, has been buzzing, right? We were hashing out all of this, right? One friend of mine there, let's call him the Eternal Optimist, is so certain about the 2-month timeline that he's joking about throwing an XRP ETF Halloween party this year. And he is already planning the costumes, right? Meanwhile, of course, another friend, ever the skeptic, was like, all right, calm down. You don't know the SEC, and they can, of course, delay these things just for fun, right? Now, both perspectives are valid. If you ask me, right, it's kind of like you've got an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, one hyping me up and the other one preaching caution. Now, before I even kind of think about making any big moves, let me kind of drop a rather quick reality check. And this one might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Like, cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video today is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Alright, I'm glad that we got that out of the way. So where does that actually leave us then? Well, personally, I'm to be watching the SEC a bit like a hawk over the next couple of months. If Nate is right about those new rules getting adopted, well, we could witness something historic. A whole bunch of crypto ETFs launching almost all at once. Now, I remember the buzz when the first Bitcoin ETF launched back in October of 2023, I think it was, right? Bitcoin's price shot up to new highs, right? And it was fantastic, right? And it kind of felt like crypto had finally hit the mainstream. Then that was just one ETF after all, right? Now imagine several different cryptocurrency ETFs for XRP, Cardano, maybe even Solana and others, all getting approved in the same short span. Now it could be absolute, mania in the markets. I mean, an XRP ETF and a Cardano ETF could really make those projects' official kind of debut on Wall Street. And could you potentially have XRP in your 401k or Cardano in your brokerage account without ever actually touching a cryptocurrency wallet? How crazy is that? Now, no matter what happens, the next few months are going to be really interesting. Either we're on the brink of a new crypto ETF era, or we're going to end up waiting a little bit longer. But I have a good feeling about this, right? The momentum, the money, the odds, all of it really seems to be pointing in the direction this time. At least I'm optimistic about it, but I'm also ready just in case anything else happens. So here is my plan, right? I'm going to stay informed. I'm going to stay ready, and I'm not going to let the hype make me do anything too crazy. I'm excited, but I'm keeping my feet on the ground, right? And it's really important to do that. I'm not about to kind of take out a loan and YOLO into crypto. I'm just going to make sure that my current investments are where I want them to be and that I'm comfortable with my holdings, right? Maybe I'll tweak a thing or two, or maybe nothing too dramatic there, right? If these ETFs get approved as kind of hoped, fantastic. I'll pop the digital champagne and break down what it all means. And if they get delayed or denied, well, the crypto journey continues and we'll just adapt. Now, you know that I'm going to be here talking about it either way, on the Discord server and on this channel, of course. Now, I'm curious though, right? What about you? Do you think you're actually going to see those XRP and Cardano ETF approvals in the next couple of months? And if they do drop, would you personally invest in the ETF, or do you prefer owning the actual coins yourself? You can let me know what you think down in the comments or over in the Discord community. I like hearing all your different takes, whether you're hyped or whether you are skeptical. Now, honestly, it's kind of amazing that we're even having this kind of conversation, right? 5 years ago, the idea of an XRP or Cardano ETF, it seemed like a far-fetched dream. Now it feels like it's just a matter of time. It really shows how far the crypto world has come, in bridging the gap between traditional finance and crypto, and being that kind of fringe internet magic money to potentially being something that your grandmother could actually invest in via her retirement account. That's a massive, and it's a big deal, right? All right, okay. So let me go into my take on the new timeline for XRP and Cardano ETF approvals, right? It's been a pretty wild ride just thinking all of this through, right? And things are only really going to get crazier if these predictions do pan out. So if you found this interesting, at least as interesting as I did, then stick around on the channel, right? I've got more stories, updates, and in-depth breakdowns coming in the future. And hey, we learn and we ride this wave together. So smash the like button, subscribe for more crypto adventures, and I'll see you all in the next one.